Welcome to the Municipal Voice, CCM's radio podcast in collaboration with WNHHLP 103.5 FM, connecting Connecticut's municipalities. We are your source for news on the municipal level across the state of Connecticut. I'm your host, Matt Ford, and in the studio today with me is Laura Francis, First Selectman of Durham, and Brian O'Connor, Director of Public Policy for CCM. Today we're going to be talking about the election and its implications for municipalities. But first, we wanted to talk about our convention last week. And I wanted to give a shout out to some of our Municipal Excellence Award winners. So first off, CCM's Municipal Excellence Awards recognize innovative projects and individuals that have significantly improved the quality of life for citizens, established partnerships, and built community support. The competition applauds the achievements of leaders and municipalities and encourages others to strive for excellence. So we awarded these at our convention last week, and some of the winners were for the creative use of resources, partnerships, and collaborations. The City of Torrington won for the Bowman Seniors Gardens. Stonington Police Department won for their Police Radio Upgrade Project. South Windsor won for their Emergency Operations Center. And Norwalk won for its GIS permit and inspection system that they implemented. We also had a Lifetime Achievement winner of the Joel Kogan Awards and the Richard C. Lee Awards, Matt Galligan, the town manager of South Windsor. After that, we also awarded towns the Sustainable CT levels for sustainability, and luckily, Selectman Francis is a co-chair of Sustainable CT, so perhaps you can explain a little bit to us about what the project is.
Sure. We're in our first year of the Sustainable CT program, which is a menu of action items that municipalities can complete and earn points towards certification. We have two levels of certification, one a bronze level, one is a silver level. And those action items are in 9 different areas of sustainability. And we were so pleased that in our first year that 22 communities achieved certification.
Yeah, that's great.
And the beauty of this program is that it's all shareable. So this program is one of the ultimate collaborative efforts that municipalities can be part of, because one of the requirements is that when you do upload your projects to be judged for certification, you have to give us your the plan and how you completed that action item.
Yep.
So many of them are replicable around the state. So now we have on our website how all those communities completed their projects, so towns like mine
Can replicate it. Yeah, that's great.
And so it's really a great way to build community spirit and create action groups and little small constituencies within your community to work towards sustainability.
Yeah, that's great. I see all the time, because obviously being at CCM, we follow the town news. I think this year we got up over 60 towns participating now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well achieved our goals.
That's great. And we awarded quite a few. For viewers at home watching on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, you can check out, we put up all the names of the winners, and it's also available on our website at ccm-ct.org. So please check that out. Now, obviously, the big news today is the elections last night. And we have Laura and our policy expert here, Brian, to talk about this with us. And the big race, obviously, was the governor's race. And Ned Lamont is the winner. We also had, for Secretary of State, Denise Merrill won, Treasurer Sean Wooden, Comptroller Kevin Lembo, and Attorney General William Tong. We were lucky enough last week at our annual convention to host the final televised gubernatorial debate. And at that debate, our executive director, Joe DeLong, had the opportunity to ask questions among a panel of other experts and dignitaries. And he asked a question of Ned Lamont, which I would actually like to play for.
However, according to the nonprofit Lincoln Institute for Land Policy, Connecticut towns and cities are more dependent on the property tax than any other state. What are your plans to address municipalities' over-reliance on the property tax? And are you supportive of efforts to allow cities and towns to directly diversify their revenue streams in order to curb property tax over-reliance?
Well, I appreciate your question. We over-rely on the property tax. It's a regressive tax. It's a tough tax. It's a tax that hits the middle class, which is why it's the tax I say I am going to reduce in the first budget cycle and the second budget cycle. $300 in the first cycle, $1,500 for middle-class folks in the second cycle. If, as you imply, you will...
So our question that Joe DeLong asked at the debate was, local governments are overly reliant on the regressive property tax to fund municipal operations and provide essential services. This burden will become even more problematic for property taxpayers because of the federal reform law that went into effect in 2018. Besides state aid, there are very few other mechanisms outside of the property tax for municipalities to generate revenues. What are your plans to address municipalities' over-reliance on the property tax, and are you supportive of efforts to allow cities and towns to directly diversify their revenue streams? If yes, what options would you consider? If not, what course of action would you pursue instead? And now Governor, soon-to-be Governor, Governor-elect Lamont's response here. As a former elected municipal official, I know that towns have struggled with increasing demands for services and, in many places, a small or shrinking tax base. But new taxes aren't the solution for Connecticut. Instead, I will prioritize an emphasis on shared services, regional cooperation, support the legislative fixes and financial investments required to make that cooperation effective, champion an effort to properly fund state formula aid to municipalities, and work with legislative and municipal leaders to explore dedicating current, reliable revenue sources to municipal budgets, all while recognizing we must craft workable solutions that preserve Connecticut's quality of life and the distinct character of our towns. So, that was quite a mouthful right there. Brian, Laura, first of all, I ask Brian, why, from CCN's perspective, is the property tax regressive and an important issue for the governor to address?
It's an important issue because the last during the last budget cycle, you know, when we were facing billion-dollar deficits, the first thing that was at stake was municipal aid, and when it was reduced, it put an exorbitant amount of pressure on the property tax. And we actually did a report. This is a different report where we kind of focused on, you know, looking at alternative revenue sources and trying to find a different way. And one of the things that I think is important to point out is that the property tax we're very uncompetitive compared to our neighbors, and it's one of those things there's no more room to give on it. And I think our municipalities are feeling it. I think towns like Durham are feeling it, especially with education costs rising and everything else.
Well, I was happy to hear from now Governor Lamont that he is cognizant that cuts in municipal aid equals a direct dollar for dollar just about increase in property taxes. But what I'd like to hear more from him about is what he perceives as the impediments to regionalization and shared services. Because it is my experience that municipalities will and do share services and regionalize when it makes sense. While there still are some legislative impediments to doing that seamlessly, there is already in existence the ability to do that. And the times that we don't do it is when it doesn't save us anything to do it.
You don't save anything if you don't try to save anything.
Right. Yeah. And every time, you know, I have a relationship with every single one of our surrounding towns, and we cross party lines all the time to make the right decisions for our community.
Yeah.
And we often are met with great desire to do something. Where we stop those efforts is when we don't save anything.
If you're not saving, why would you?
Right.
And working across party lines is great. And I always think of first selectmen and mayors as, you know, you're on the ground, so you can't get caught up in these high-minded kind of debates that have no bearing on your town. You have to get things done in your town.
That's correct.
You have to function. services have to happen.
We do not let party affiliation get in the way when we're working with our municipal partners across our borders. More importantly, we don't let it get in the way within our town.
Mm-hmm.
Within our town.
Yeah, that's always important. Now, I think one place where sometimes things like that do get in the way is up in Hartford. And obviously there's some results coming out of the election from last night up there too. I know that we had up in your neck of the woods, we had Len Fasano from District 34 was reelected, whereas Len Suzio from District 13 was not. And that's obviously going to change the dynamic up in Hartford, and I'm wondering what your take on that was and what you see as important going forward with this new administration from the municipal standpoint.
Well, the last 2 years when we had a tie in the Senate and the numbers were close in the House, that created a new dynamic.
Yeah.
And while it took us a little bit to get there, we got to the point where both parties were working together and actually did create bipartisan budgets.
Out of necessity, really.
And so what I would like to see now that the numbers have changed is that we continue that kind of behavior up there rather than going back to the way it was, which was both party caucuses in their own corners, walking out of the rooms, not being invited into the room, and creating separate budgets. So I hope that this new governor will create a culture up there that just won't stand for that type of partisan behavior anymore because there's too much at stake.
Well, I think we all hope that.
And I was just going to point out, I think the margins, if you look at them, for the Senate, it's gone, right now it's 21-12 with 3 outstanding to be determined. But right now, the 3 Democrats in those races are ahead. So it could get to a veto-proof majority up in the Senate.
So we already know they have a majority, but there's a possibility that this would be a veto-proof majority.
That's correct. And, okay. I think, if you look at some of the members that retired or chose not to run again, they were more conservative or moderate Democrats, and they've been replaced by more progressive Democrats. So I think you're going to see, just as far as the budget process, I think you're going to see a more cohesive Democratic Party as they put that together. In the House, their numbers, are, I think the final number is going to be 93 Democrats and 58 Republicans. And again, there's a couple of recounts, but we don't anticipate any changes through that process. But even there, I think, leadership always has trouble getting those final votes. Now they have a little bit of a cushion in putting budgets together. So hopefully we won't have an extended time frame. But I also understand where Laura's coming from, where you need a bipartisan package. I mean, if you think about it, 48% of the voters, did vote for the Republican candidate. And there was, 4% voted for Oz or the independent.
Yeah, this wasn't a landslide.
So I think I think the message is loud and clear that they want people to work together.
Yeah. Yeah, this was not a landslide or a mandate by any measure. It was a real squeaker. So what issues do you want to make sure that Ned Lamont as governor addresses in this session, I would say?
Well, clearly municipal aid is a lot on my mind. And the way the budget process proceeds. So in a municipal budget, it's very difficult for us to make adjustments, especially when it's
after you've already been given initial numbers.
That's right. Because there's just not a lot of wiggle room in our budgets. So I would like some greater predictability. And education is really starting to take a hit over the last few years. So I'd like to see that educational cost sharing formula is looked at again. It was changed. The way it was changed has really hurt small towns like Durham because the emphasis is more on income wealth versus property wealth.
Okay.
And you have to understand that in a municipality like Durham, and there's many like Durham around our state, our ability to change that grand list valuation is limited. and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. So you can't adapt quickly to changing numbers.
For changing numbers.
And I know last year, the state aid stuff came rather late, right?
Rather late.
And so you had to figure out your entire budget on time because it's your job.
That's right.
And you do it. But then the state doesn't do their job, holds the stuff up, and then changes it and kind of pulls the rug out underneath you and says, figure it out.
Right.
But you still have to make sure that all those things still get done.
Right. And so if you're cut $1 million
mm-hmm.
and you have a net $6 million budget, where do you overnight,
just whip that
absorb
up,
that? And, and to be fair, even the school district, which has a much bigger budget, how can they make an overnight, adjustment of $1 million?
Yeah, you've already made promises, you've already made plans, you spent this time and effort trying to adhere to this budget, which is usually pretty tight, I'm guessing, already.
It's very tight, and because we have been making those cuts year over year since the recession hit in 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
So there is very little wiggle room in our budget.
Yeah, you've already made the cuts, and towns have already been feeling the pain.
Right.
And when the state tries to essentially pass on some of that to the towns,
correct,
you're already at your limits. So Brian, from CCM's perspective, what does your department or our organization really want to see addressed in this upcoming?
Well, I think the first order of business for us is to, once the new chairmen are named, meet them, because there's going to be some changes in planning and development, I think, which is one of the key committees that we focus on.
Yep.
And I think the important thing, too, is when Governor-elect Lamont puts his administration together, is getting in front of the new OPM secretary and making those kind of meetings for our leadership or executives, both at CCM members and, Joe and Ron and others in the office. But it's to make sure that they understand our issues before they even, right now they're probably already putting a budget together.
Yeah.
They pretty much finalize it by January, so we have to get in there fairly quickly and, advocate on behalf of the cities and towns. And really, one of the things I just want to point out, I was encouraged actually by Governor-elect Lamont. One of his answers on the questionnaire that you can find on our election center is that he's looking at incentives actually for cost sharing and efficiency. So hopefully we can build on that too. I think that's really positive.
A little more carrot, a little less stick is always a nice way to go.
Yeah, that always works better.
Let me pause for 1 second here and do a station ID. You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We are also streaming live video on Facebook Live and on YouTube. Just go to facebook.com/New Haven Independent or go to ccm-ct.org. So one of our big issues always with CCM and in relation to state is the topic of unfunded mandates, which, is near and dear to our heart because it's essentially the state saying you as a town have to do XYZ. But we're not going to tell you how to pay for it or give you any money to pay for it. We just think it's a great idea. So if you could touch a little bit on why unpaid mandates are so big for CCM and how they affect the everyday voter and the taxpayer in this town, I think that would be great for the listeners out there.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, I think we're up to 1,300 unfunded mandates on municipalities.
That's 1,300.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that just tells a story right there. I think one of the things that we can't afford anymore, and I think what we have to really get across, and I think we have been effective at it, is the fact that if there is an unfunded mandate, it's just a property tax increase because you got to pay for it somehow, or you're going to cut an essential service in order to make your needs locally.
Yeah, and it raises property taxes because, as we were asking at the debate, towns don't really have a lot of other options to raise revenue in the state of Connecticut. There's no sales taxes for the towns. There's none of this kind of stuff. Selectman Francis, what is there a mandate that affected your town that you can think of directly where they put it in place without thinking forward as how it would affect Durham or other towns like it?
Well, I think the most costly mandates are on the education.
Yeah.
And, some of the record keeping, some of the positions, there's not a lot of flexibility there. A lot of the curriculum mandates that if a school district was able to adjust and have some flexibility with, could create some cost savings.
Like combine some roles within the administration and stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
The minimum budget requirement is almost an unfunded mandate because it's not flexible enough for districts to achieve efficiency.
Okay. The minimum budget requirement, what does that entail? How does that work? Brian, maybe you...
essentially is you take what you spent last year and then...
On education.
On education. And then the upcoming year, that's your baseline. So
okay.
You can't go below that level. And I think one of the things that, particularly with special education, let's say a student either moves out of district or ages out of a district, you're still paying for that child because the legacy cost of that child is built into the MBR.
The previous year's budget.
Yeah. So the idea is one of the things that we've been advocating for is to allow towns to actually, account for that and reduce their budget accordingly.
Yeah, as I know, I've seen that there's some towns in Connecticut that actually have a shrinking school population. So there's less students at the school, but they can't lower their budget even though there's less students that need it.
Yeah, they can lower a very small percentage, but not the true cost of that declining enrollment.
And so that's one of the things that we would like to see is them being able to...
Yeah, I mean, I think our towns manage their budgets pretty well, and I think you need to give them some flexibility in doing it.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. We need to trust them a little bit to keep their residents best, And
I think the key thing is you're not going to compromise education quality. So there's things that can be achieved, and hopefully, right now, CCM's been working with basically a counterpart, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Ed. So hopefully we can come to some resolution on this. I know there have been pretty positive talks. So hopefully we can achieve some common ground on some issues. We agree on 80% of the issues. Let's work on the next one.
No one wants to not educate the kids, doesn't want to take care of everything. We just want to be able to be smart about how we're spending that money. And if we don't need to spend it on X, we should be able to take that back and put it where it is needed, is really what we're looking at. So we were talking a little bit before about the changing dynamic. What do you see coming out of this election for the state as a whole? Do you see trends as far as what you expect to be happening with this administration?
Well, some of the things haven't changed at all. One of the things we're looking at is unfunded pension liability, both at the state employee retirement system and also the teachers' retirement system.
Yeah, that's a big number that's not going anywhere yet.
Who's in the legislature? Yeah. That's something that they're going to have to tackle in the near future. I think one of the things that I'm excited about is that, Governor-elect Lamont has a business background. So hopefully he can, use that experience to help with economic development, help build vibrant communities, and, hopefully be able to, kind of use some of that experience to achieve efficiencies with state government.
Yeah.
So I'll speak to what I think is maybe a political trend that I see. I believe that there was a Trump effect felt in this election. I think that one thing that I've heard over and over is we want civility to come back.
I think everyone would like that, yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that the trend is that the people calling for civility are civil.
that would be a good way to go.
And so if that is a result of the Trump effect in Connecticut, then I look forward to that.
That's great. So you obviously are a member of CCM. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how that start, like how you came and discovered CCM, and kind of how it's worked with your town and with you.
So I've been in municipal local service for 27 years. I was 15 years in the town clerk's office,
Okay.
and now 11 years in the selectman's office. And CCM has always been part of my professional career, whether providing career development, trainings. I've been a speaker, even as town clerk. I've been a speaker on some CCM panels and
yeah, we certainly want all our members to
opportunities.
participate and their knowledge to be a
Right.
part of our
It's
strength.
always been a resource for me and for our town, whether it's research, training. We've been a KERMA town, so it's always been a part of our
Yep.
insurance portfolio. I see CCM now that I am the CEO as an extension of my staff.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Especially
Thank
in some of our smaller towns like Durham.
That's correct.
You know, you don't have these huge
have
staffs with research staff and all this other stuff, so we can provide that.
Right.
And obviously we also, through Brian and his staff, provide representation at the state.
Right. It's just, you're looked at as an advocacy group, but it's really much more than that.
Yeah, we services, training, all that kind of stuff. It's since I've started working there, I've really come to appreciate the intricacies of running town government. Which, congratulations to you for sounds like over 20 years there of in-town government. That's great. Well, thank you for your service. I think one of the other great things that we got last night, other than the various winners, is a lot of people turned out.
Yes.
Yes. And, we have done a very good job of educating our electorate. So I think there was a time that people didn't see that one-on-one connection to what happens in Hartford and how it affects municipal. Yeah. There was a little bit bigger divide than there is now in that concept. And I'll tell you, I have a ballot initiative going forward in December. And I've already heard people say, I really want to vote yes, but I'm not sure what's happening in Hartford.
Yeah.
And I think that's a result of some of the education process that CCM has done with reaching out to residents of Connecticut to teach them about how actually what happens in Hartford and how
really
it affects.
Pull back that curtain so they can see what's going on in there. And everyone, complains, or not everyone, but no one likes paying taxes. But seeing how that really is getting used at the state and why their local property tax bill is going up, and they're not necessarily seeing where it's going, it's because of policy that they're not aware of. And I think as an organization, educating people through our training, through debates, through this show is a really important part of our mission.
It's a key part. And I think, just to focus on the turnout, I think it was also just a realization that, you do have a voice, you do have an impact on who represents you. And I think, what Laura pointed out, I think people are looking for civility. I think actually, the people going into office, you got to think that that's one of the things they're going to bring up to Hartford. So hopefully, the tenor will change a little bit and, get more stuff done, be more cooperative.
Yeah.
And we have to start changing the narrative. This state is worth fighting for.
I agree.
And we have a lot of positives, but we haven't focused on the positive aspects of Connecticut. So we have to start by talking better about ourselves.
Play to our strengths, yeah.
Play to our strengths. And if we can get more of that out of Hartford, I think people will be more ready and willing to maybe absorb some of the shock that we have to absorb in order to solve our problems.
People like to know what they're paying for. Are we spending it wisely? It's not, I don't want to support my community or my state or what needs to get done. It's, we want to make sure that our money is being spent wisely. Yeah.
And that it's working towards achieving a goal.
That's always a good way to go, isn't it?
That's the only way to go.
Yeah. Now, one thing I was paying attention to yesterday, I don't know if we've followed this at all, but there was a ballot question about public lands. Have we looked into this at all? This
CCM did not take an official position.
Okay.
But basically what it does is if the state, particularly Department of Agriculture or Department of Environment and Energy Protection, sell land,
yep.
The local community, you have to have a public hearing on it, and it also has to pass by a 2/3 vote of the legislature.
That's what the initiative was hoping for.
Yes.
And I didn't see whether or not it passed.
It passed overwhelmingly.
Okay, well, that's good. So previously, that wasn't the case?
It was in statute, but I think, that sometimes the way the legislature works, they just say, notwithstanding this statute, we're going to do Y. And there was some controversial land sales.
So there were some specific cases that brought this to the forefront.
Correct. So they wanted to make it more ironclad.
Well, that sounds good. If you're going to have something as a statute, you probably should adhere to it. Yeah.
The key difference is it used to be just a simple majority, but now you have the 2/3.
Oh, okay. I think this is why we have the experts on here to explain how all this stuff works. All right. Well, is there anything else that we would like to talk about today? How do you feel today after this election? Are you hopeful?
No.
Tired.
Yeah.
I think you touched upon something that I wanted to emphasize, and that is that there were so many tight races.
Yeah.
That I don't think any one official could consider a mandate by any means. I think the closeness of this election, especially for governor, should be interpreted as people are tired of partisanship, and that they would like to see some cooperation, collaboration, and compromise. We have to bring compromise back into our vernacular, and we can't look at it as a failure.
Yeah. That for how long was compromise the ultimate goal of most legislation? Now it seems like it's an anathema or something to some politicians, not all of them, certainly. Not the ones in this room.
That's correct. And I think, people just want, people to work, toward those common goals that I think we all have. We might think about them differently, but I think the end results is what people are looking for now.
Well, that's great. So if any of you at home are watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, feel free to comment in the comment section and tell us what you think they should be paying attention to in Hartford, or what you think we at CCM need to press them on. So I would like to thank Selectman Francis for joining us today, and Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to do our little outro here. We're going to sign off, and we'll see you next week on Municipal Voice. So the state of Connecticut has its work cut out for it, and a new batch of legislators to get it done. Thank you to our guests, Brian O'Connor and Laura Francis, First Selectman of Durham, for guiding us on what will need to be accomplished in the coming years. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm your host, Matt Ford. Join us next week on November 21st for Kurt Miller of Seymour and Dale Bruckhart of Digital Back Office, talking about IT solutions for municipalities. So that should be an interesting topic. See you all then.